Right, so we're going to take a look at something like this, and then we're going to take a look at just kind of breaking objects. So what this is these are called rigid body constraints, right? So we have an object that is constrained, sort of like a point or pendulum here, and then we have another one that operates on a hinge. So you can see we hit this kind of door and it swings. And this stuff is great because as much as you can get comfortable with physics, and then we'll also get into breaking objects, it's kind of like a bonus for this week's lesson. But the more you can get comfortable with these sorts of things, these hinges and things like that, the easier it is for you to animate sort of physics or things that are going on around in your scene. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just make a new scene. Just make it general. I won't save this. And let's go ahead and hit the tilde key, and let's go ahead and hit front. So we're looking at our front view here. I'm going to hit S to scale this down. I'm going to hit G and just move it up here. Shift and A, and I'm going to go to mesh, and then I'm going to create a UV sphere. Hit G, and I'm just going to put it next to it. I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to go to Object and do Physics here, Rigid Body, and I'm just going to add Active for now. Now for this one, I want to go to the Physics section, and I'm going to change this from Active to Passive, because when I hit Spacebar, I want this to hold in place, and I'm going to lock this as a pendulum to move. If you hold Shift and you press the left arrow key on your keyboard, it'll snap back. You can also push this button here, and that'll snap it back to 0. All right, so here we are in active, and what I want to do with this guy, again, is leave this active, but on this one, I'm going to just call this point, just to kind of really illustrate what we're doing. And then on this, I'm going to add a rigid body constraint. Now you'll see there's two elements here. There's a first and second. So for the first, I want to select this object point here. And for the second, I want to select this sphere. Now the final step is where it says type passive here, we want to leave that as passive. And then where it says rigid body constraint for type here, we want to go, let's take a look at point first. So if I hit spacebar now, you can see that I have a pendulum going, right? And I'm going to hold shift and go back. Now, if I click G here, notice that a line appeared here. And as I hit spacebar, it has kind of a longer reach, right? So shift and left arrow key, I'm going to hit G here. All right, let's go into our 3D view by clicking in our middle wheel here. I'm going to hit shift and A, and I'm going to create a mesh and a cube here. And I'm going to hit tilde, and I'm going to just go to my front view for a second. Hit G, and I'm going to move it maybe somewhere like this. I'm going to hit S to scale this down, and then S, and then I'm going to press the Z key for my up and down, and I'm just going to scale this up. Go back to 3D view, and then hit shift, and then, well, let's hit G, and then X, or sorry, Y rather, and move it over to the side. Then I'm going to hit shift D to duplicate that, and then G, and then Z, G and Y rather. Sorry, I keep forgetting I'm not using Maya. So then S and then Y, and I'm just going to scale this out. Now what I'd like to do is, as I hit spacebar here, I'd like this to do what I kind of showed you in the video, where it hits it as a hinge. So I'm going to select both of these. I'm going to hit shift and arrow key to go back, go to object here, and then go to rigid body, and I'm going to add active. Now for this one, I'm going to change it to passive, this one being the hinge. I'm going to add a rigid body constraint, and then from fixed, I'm going to do hinge here. And then for the first object, I'm going to select the hinge. And for the second object, I'm going to select my door. Now for the door here, I might take the weight down to 0.5. And just so when I hit spacebar, it gives it a little bit more of a whammy there to spin around. And you could see something like this. So I'm going to hold shift and arrow here. And what we could do is hit G, and let's see, Z here, move this up just a little bit, and then hit spacebar, let it hit it. See if we can time this out so that it keeps spinning. That's okay. It kind of pushes the door. But it's cool having this, right? Something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit spacebar, shift arrow, start this over a little bit. Actually, something else we can do is, if you don't like, here, let me hit spacebar here, it moving this far in your animation and you want it to stop somewhere like that, let's go ahead and hit N here. And you could see, here's the rotation, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit spacebar. And you could see as it's rotating, let's see, where is, let's go back. Let's undo that. Let's make this 0. And, oh, it might not rotate because it's not set to animation, I think. Yeah, there we go. Just for, well, let's say this is about 90 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to hit shift and arrow, hit spacebar. You can see it's not moving. So we want to turn animated off. Okay, so what am I trying to show you? Well, if I don't want the door to swing all the way across, I just want it to swing open. Say you're doing like an animation. You could turn on this Z angle here. And now when I hit spacebar, it limits the range of how far the door will go. So let's say, okay, well, I would like the lower to be 90, minus 90, and this one to be 90 degrees. Because remember, when we zero it out, it's like there. Now when I hit spacebar, we can limit the angle. And it feels more like a door would, right? Like it kind of gives it a little bit of a pop back. Say there's a wall here. You could also set up a collision there and it'll bounce off that wall. Okay, let's go back a little bit. I'm going to save this scene as 05 rigid body CNT for constraints. Something else I want to point out is I'm going to move this out here a little bit, right? And did my hinge break? No, it's still there. If I hit spacebar, you'll see here that it still registers that as the hinge regardless of how far I move it, right? It's still saying that this center point, because if I turn this on, let's go ahead and hit and move this back. Do you see, if I select my axis here, do you see that the pivot point is here in the center of this? So it's using that as its hinge. So let me Control Z a couple times to get this back to where it was. It's using that center point here to rotate the hinge. And it's actually sending that direct line is from the point from here to here for the hinge movement. Let's make sure this is still set to 90.